Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Unqualified podcast. I'm Pat and joined by my buddy Brendan. This is the podcast where two lifelong fans try to make sense of their sports teams and usually fail at it. So we're glad that you can join us today. I am a Jets fan, unfortunately, but my friend Brendan and I are both Mets fans. He's a Devils fan. I'm an Islanders fan. And he's also a Jaguars fan. Pal, give us just a quick little background on that. How did you become a Jaguars fan being from New York
Yeah,
and New Jersey?
I'll give you a very, very quick rundown. So back in the mid '90s, I was somebody who grew up, born in New Jersey. You know, typical things happen. Parents get divorced. You move away as a kid. So I moved to Western New York, lived outside of Buffalo. Never was a Bills fan, thankfully. But with that being said, growing up as a very young kid, always a Giants fan. When I had the opportunity to come back to New Jersey, mid '90s, I realized a lot of the Giant fans reminded me of a certain baseball fan base, and they got under my skin. And I was not a fan of this. So I kind of veered off. You know, the new shiny toy came into the league with the Jaguars. And I think for me, what it had drawn me to that team is there was a part of me deep down. I was like, at some point, I would like to live in Florida. So there was like that type of pull. But a lot of the guys that I watched in college, especially through my teenage years, played on the Jaguars, right? So those guys like I watched in college, Tony Bracken's defensive end, Texas, Artie, the linebacker from the Illini, James Stewart, Mark Brunell when he was with the Huskies. So don't forget Natron Means. Come on. I mean,
Yeah.
had a magical run back in '96 in the playoffs, but I was just drawn to that group in the '96 season. So I've been a true Jaguar fan for the last 30 years. My daughter likes the Giants, so Giants still remain kind of like that secondary team to me. So there's a part of me where I do want to see the Giants win and be successful, but not at the expense of the Jaguars these days.
The big thing I remember from that 96 season is the playoff win at Denver.
It's
That
funny. I remember
was
the win at Buffalo, but that's just me.
yeah, that one too. I think they were they were huge underdogs in that game from what I remember. And they just went into Denver and really shocked the Broncos. And I was watching the John Elway documentary recently, and he talked about just how devastating that loss
Yeah.
was for him because he knew he was coming to the end of his career, didn't know if he was going to get another chance. And yeah, that what the Jags did that day, that was really impressive.
Yeah, impressive because the only reason, and I apologize because it's been 30 years. I'm going to forget which Anderson was kicking for the Falcons. Literally missed an extra point in the last week of the season that that opened the door for the Jaguars to get the win, get that last playoff spot for them.
I think it was
Obviously,
Morton. I
was it
believe
Morton
Morton. I
at that
believe so.
time? Yeah. So it opened the door for us and kept us alive. And a team that really shouldn't have, but somehow they had come together that year in a good way, beating the Broncos, beating the Bills. Unfortunately, like a lot of my misery and probably yours as well, that season came to an end in New England. So that to me was a rough one that always stands out. Still the 17 championship game too against the Patriots. I haven't let go of that one.
We're going to have a lot of time to get into our football pain. Yes, talking about the Patriots, we both had a lot of heartbreak at their expense, but let's focus on our baseball team. It's a new season.
Wait, are you
Our New
telling
Year.
me you don't want to hear about me planning, in the third quarter of the 17 championship, going to Minnesota for Super Bowl tickets? I won't do that to you today, but it's always
Oh,
there on the
yeah,
table if you want to hear that story.
we're definitely going to hit on that, pal. But let's get into our baseball team here. We come into this season, very disappointing year last year. The first week, they start out on opening day. They look like a juggernaut, scoring 11 runs. It looked like, hey, the moves that Stearns made in the offseason, everything looked good. Then, they kind of falter a little bit. They win 2 or 3 against the Pirates. They lose 2 or 3 against the Cardinals. And then they lose that first game in San Francisco on Thursday. And you're like, oh, they just look lifeless. The offense looks lifeless. And then they come back now and they win 3 in a row. And we're back over 500. So how would you assess this first week? To me, I feel like, and you mentioned this a couple of days ago, we really still don't know what this team is. And I don't think you really know, obviously, what a team is after 1 week. But what is your sense now coming out of this first week?
Nope. All right, coming out of the first week, 10 games, I guess here, 6-4, and I have no idea if this team is good or bad. I mean, I could see them easily winning 78 or winning 96 games. I can feel good about pitching in the first week and a half. I think we all should feel good about pitching in the first week and a half. Our starters were good. You know, again, but I think pitching started off well last year and it took a nosedive somewhere around mid-June and completely went off a cliff. So, from that perspective, I honestly, I look at this team and I see there's a lot of, of course, there's a lot of talent. I think we can feel good that we can look at somebody like Nolan McLean and be happy, right? I mean, I'm still, and as you know this, and I'll complain a lot, I'm still not over Pete. I'm still hurt by treating Pete the way he did and letting him walk. And when I see Polanco, batting 111, I'm not like excited about it, but I'll come off that soapbox. But no, when you look up and down the lineup, yeah, there's talent there, of course. There's talent in our bullpen, but it's just like, I don't know. The Mets are going to Met at some point, and like, which way are we going to go with this? And I sit here today, and I'm honestly a week and a half into the season or 10 games in, I'm confused.
There was definitely some Met moments this week. Lindor's terrible game against the Cardinals where, he forgets how many outs there are and then he gets picked off. And that was proved to be really costly in the game. And just kind of some mental mistakes you don't normally see from him. And then there was a miscommunication on the pop fly the other day with Simeon. Sorry.
Yep, that's okay. Got a bunch of
Yeah,
new
so I
guys.
mean, it's like some Met-like things were already happening in the first week of the season, and it's kinda like, okay, we infused a lot of new pieces here. The core was kinda stripped down in the offseason, so what is the identity gonna be? And you sent me this thing, I think was on Instagram, and I agreed with it. I think Carlos Mendoza missed a huge opportunity to sit Lindor down after those mental mistakes and kind of set an example to the rest of the team. He could have pulled Lindor aside and been like, this is not personal. Like, I need to set an example. And you've heard of coaches doing this in all sports, just to kind of get their message across, like, this is not going to be acceptable and have that message, kind of trickle down to the rest of the team. I think that was a huge missed opportunity this week for the manager.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if we back it up to opening day, you called it right off the Star Spangled Banner. I mean, that was as Mets as it gets of messing up the Star Spangled Banner. And now, granted, not a Met, but still, it is a typical Met thing to happen. But I think as a Met fan, right, you should be concerned on where Lindor is. Like, are we going down a road that we have to pick between Lindor and Soto? Right? Like, obviously, the world we live in, we're back in Soto these days, right? As much, the way clearly they're going to manage from the top in this organization, right? It's the backing of will be behind Soto. So when he has that game the other day, where yeah, a mental error happens, but those two mental errors from somebody of that caliber, right? To your point, it's just to me something's off, right? And is this a carryover from last year? Is this part of the dynamics? And obviously, you and I are definitely not the experts here, or nor in the clubhouse. But at the end of the day, do we have a problem, right? And if that's the case, it really doesn't matter, right? Because I think if that is a core issue for our team, then we're screwed no matter what. I think
Well, Frank the
we got to
Tank
fix
thinks we
that.
have a problem. Frank definitely thinks we have a problem.
Fuck Frank. If I see him
Man.
bite on another thing, that dude he would have been perfect character for a Bronx Tale, right? Like, he's mush. Throw him in the bathroom. That's where he needs to go. I hate that he's a fan of teams I like. So it gets under my skin when he hops on and goes on his rant. Not to say he's all wrong, but something about it is like he's like a curse, like Fireman Ed for your Jets. I mean, that's how I look at him, and I just don't like having that curse over us.
I don't think Ed's a curse, but we can get into that another time. But I
Come on,
understand what you're
stop it.
saying. I hear you.
Fire that dude.
I hear you. So kind of an uneven week for the Mets first week. The Soto injury is something we haven't touched on. Isn't it crazy that they are 3-0 since the Soto injury and the offense has looked pretty good? Do you read into that at all? He's had a decent start to the season, I think. He had a homer, he's been hitting, has some RBIs, like, it didn't feel like the start that he had last year. But yeah, I mean, obviously he's day to day. We don't know the long-term status. How do you think that's gonna affect the lineup now going forward?
Well, I laugh because I feel like the last couple of years it's just, the same thing. Okay, it's a minor calf injury, day to day. In my head, the first thing I went to and I texted you about, all right, over under, like, is he playing before May 4th or after? Because this
May
is,
the 4th.
typically, yeah, May the 4th be with us, I guess. But, like, is he going to be out? And I could see this being one of those things where we may not see him for a few weeks just to be cautious, which is fair.
Yep.
It's a long season. Realistically, nobody should, the month of April shouldn't scare us, right? This week we got the Diamondbacks that are in trouble. We have the Athletics. So I know I try to recall everybody in my head for the month of April, but we do have a softer start to the year. So to me, if we don't see him until May, I wouldn't be surprised. I think the biggest thing that maybe come out of this that could be helpful is, do we get Vientos of 2 years ago? Right, he's
Oh,
hitting
man.
now, right, and that's a huge difference. Because at the end of the day, we need somebody, right? I could sit here and complain about Pete not being here all day, but it still doesn't change the fact we need somebody in the four hole that should be in the four hole, and that isn't Polanco. I'm sorry, it's not Polanco. That's not him.
It's tough. Yeah, the calf, you hear it more and more now as that injury being a precursor to Achilles. And I thought I read that Polanco was dealing with something as well, Achilles related. So, like you said, they got to be cautious with Juan, and we'll see what happens here. But yeah, I think there's no reason to rush him back right now.
No, I mean, again, like, I think if Vientos is hitting and hopefully he continues to hit, I think, Mendoza obviously gets crushed a lot, especially after last year and, some of this early decision making this year, whether it's Lindor or some choice selection with his, pinch hitters at, certain times in the game, right? Like, some of those questions have come up in the first week, but, you know, I think there's, an opportunity to see how this guy really can manage over this next month. Again, no need to rush back Soto at this point in time. We do have a softer schedule coming up. Make some actual coaching decisions on the field. I love Billy Ball, but at the end of the day, sometimes these guys just got to go out and play, right? So
Yep, 100%. And I hate to say it, but Mendoza could be the fall guy early in the season if they really take a nosedive. I mean, he's the guy that's gonna take the blame, I feel like. You
yeah,
know,
I was complaining
it's
about firing, what, like in the summer
you
last year.
were.
So
You were saying that basically all of last season, pretty much. Like, it's the manager, get him out of here. And I've liked Mendoza. I've liked, for the most part, the job he's done. I think, he relates to the players. I think, there's not a lot of moments where I'm like, oh, he's over managing this game. He's mismanaging the bullpen. I think he's been solid for the most part, but they did collapse last year, and it wasn't looking like it was going to be a great start so far this year. So I think the seat is pretty warm right now for him. I think they
yeah,
really have to have a good April and May. I think heading in to the summer.
agreed, right? Like, in the end, like with any sport, right? You can't win your division, you can't make the playoffs in that first, the early part of the schedule, the early part of the year, but you certainly can blow it. And I feel like with this team, again, I don't know truly what we have. It really is hot and cold at certain days when you look at this team. If we have any chance, right, we have to get off to a good start. We have to treat these early series, to be a little bit more meaningful, to get ourselves into a good place. Because again, there are things that are going to come up, right? Like, as nice as it's been to see our staff get to where they are in the first week and a half of the year. Again, some of these guys in our rotation, we watched collapse the second half last year because, right, it just literally went off the cliff and that destroyed our bullpen. And unfortunately, there's not much I think Mendoza could have done about that. But we need a
So
good
let's get
start.
into that. Yeah, pal, because looking at the overall season and just kind of previewing it and looking at what happened in the offseason, you've been vocal about how much you've hated, not bringing back Pete, and I'm with you. And there's a faction of fans who, look at him and look at him as part of the problem last year, the downfall, the collapse, not coming through with runners on base. Pete had kind of an up and down year. But to your point, to me, the collapse was all about the pitching, especially the starting pitching. When you can't even get 4 or 5 innings out of your starters, you're not gonna be a winning ball club. I'm sorry. Like, you cannot rely on your bullpen to basically carry you through, the majority of a game. So my question to you is, in terms of Stearns, the moves he's made this offseason, what's really changed with this team in your opinion, at least on paper? Do you feel like they're more clutch now offensively? I don't know. Obviously, it remains to be seen, but, you know, can the lineup kind of carry what looks to be a decent rotation, on paper? It's
Yeah.
definitely, I would say, improved from last year with the addition of Peralta and McLean having another year under his belt. But I mean, do you feel like the kind of makeup of this lineup has improved? I know we can't you can't say for sure, but what's your initial thoughts on that?
There's some aspects I do like. Obviously, yeah, I think bringing in a Bichette, I know he hasn't hit early, but right, Lindor didn't hit when he first got here. So to your point, Soto didn't really hit in the first like month and a half, 2 months of last year, and then, so it's not something that's uncommon to us. We've seen it where big name comes in and struggles, but I do like adding somebody like a Bichette to the lineup. Again, n- n- not in love with Polanco sitting in the four hole, and hopefully as it goes forward, Vientos could step up and be that person for us or look like he did 2 years ago. I think that is more ideal for him, to have those opportunities with Soto in front of him. Yeah, I worry about Carson a lot. I think we could see the talent, and I think, game one was a great example when you and I were messaging back and forth, right? He just looked overwhelmed in those first two at bats. And then, right, he worked a walk, dug himself essentially out of the hole, worked a walk, hit a home run, right? Like you could see that he's going to do well at some point.
Yeah,
But
you
I,
can see
I
why he
do,
made the team out of spring training, right?
oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I guess, like, to your question, I think there are some good aspects to the lineup. Do I think, I hesitate to say were that much better than last year. We needed that thumper in the middle of the lineup, which we don't have today. And unless again Viento steps up, I think that's going to be like that glaring hole that come July, is that where we start leveraging, one of the better farm teams, or farm systems in the majors to get, that bat, to get that other arm. And from like a staff perspective, again, I think Nolan's the real deal and he's going to be a top 10 pitcher in this league for a long time. Freddie, like we're going to have to piggyback Freddie because he's a 5 inning guy. And, that scares me after what we saw last year. And I don't know if we've done enough to make our bullpen that strong. I mean, I think there's, some bright spots, but I still like look at the back, the very back end, and Devin comes in and is a guy who's throwing like 93, 94. Is that going to be enough to get us where we need to be when those games really count against the Dodgers, against Cubs or whomever that has those strong lineups?
I think, what we kept hearing in the offseason was run prevention, right? Run prevention. That was kind of the theme and the strategy that David Stearns had in this offseason. But is that like is that manifesting itself on the field with Polanco at first? We've seen Beatty play first,
Yeah.
Simeon out there having miscommunications on pop-ups. And then to your point, Devin Williams, like, is he an upgrade?
No, I'm sorry.
I don't know.
I said, yeah. I mean,
I mean, no, he's not.
no.
That was kind of a yeah, it was a sarcastic remark there, but he's not. And of course he went to the Dodgers, of course. But, I mean, he was demoted to setup man last year with the Yankees at one point. So
Yeah.
it's like, to his credit, he hasn't looked overwhelmed thus far this season, but yeah, it's a big question mark there. And here's the thing, like closers, relief pitchers, I feel like year to year, all of them with every team, it's like you can't bank on it 100%, the performance level. I just feel like much like kickers in the NFL, it kind of fluctuates year to year, but going back to Bench for a second, to me, he is the X factor. He is my X factor for this season. If we can get some solid production out of him, I feel like this team has a potential to reach their ceiling offensively. Who's the X factor for you coming into this year? Is it
Yeah.
Devin? I mean, is
So,
it someone in the
that's
pen?
so, the funny thing is, Devin only has as a closer, he has that 1 year where you say, okay, that's a solid closer. Had 36 saves, but any other season around that. So, I hesitate to think he would step in and be that guy again. With the Yankees. He's going to struggle with the Mets. So, like, yeah, I'm not going X factor there. Honestly, I like the idea of, I was saddened where Vientos was last year, but because Vientos has that pop in his bat, he is that guy I think that can hit behind Soto, and that was my biggest, outside of losing a Met that we grew in Pete, but also that protection to Soto and all that money we pay out to Soto to have somebody like a Polanco that's had maybe one decent home run year for where he is now 32. To me, Vientos could be that guy if we could get the one for Vientos from 2 years ago, building off that and, potentially hitting behind Soto. Maybe that is, the place where he can excel and, show that pop he has in his bat.
And that guy was 2 years ago, I just think about that 24 team, pal, man, like, they had something that year, they had something special, and, I think about just how clutch Vientos was that year too. Man, he came onto the scene like
Yeah.
he was a
We had,
juggernaut, and
my God.
OMG,
Yeah.
OMG, you
We
had,
had the song. We had Grimace.
and
I mean,
Grimace,
it's a good year.
Actua.
It was
It
an
was it
interesting
was
year.
it was one of those special years, and going back to Williams, he was, part of one of our biggest highlights of that season
No,
in the
he
wild
was.
card ra
Is there a chance that he might have been broken there? Maybe. All right. It's not uncommon for closers to
Yeah.
psychologically lose it.
What I wanna know is when Pete returns, are they gonna play that highlight on the jumbotron? And what is Devin Williams gonna think? That's gonna be a moment.
I don't think they'll do that to Devin.
They
I'm
might
sure
I think maybe they'll edit it in a way to where you don't really see him
it doesn't matter.
specifically.
That doesn't matter. Everybody knows the moment. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But either way, when he comes back to the stadium, there's going to be a lot of love for him. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
just, I had a ton of respect because last year to me was his best all around year offensively. And, between the home runs, the doubles, his batting average in comparison to where he'd been brief history, but still his history. And he did that through, you know, everything that happened in the previous offseason, right? Like he showed up, showed what a professional he was. And to me, I don't think he could have been that disruptive in the clubhouse. I'm not going to say he's
It wasn't that. I don't believe it was that. I don't think they wanted to give him a long-term deal. I think that's what it came down to based on his age and how he was gonna project, but, like, to your point, he's our guy. He was our guy. Like, he was our slugger in the middle of that lineup, came up through the system, like, that was our guy, and we've seen it. We can go on about the guys we've let go that have been homegrown guys, and it's a shame, man, and people make him out to be a butcher in the field, which is, to me, totally unfair. He's an average to above average first baseman, and he wasn't costing you games. We talk about run prevention, blah blah blah, but what he brought in the lineup, severely, seriously outweighed all that, in the
so.
field,
All right. So what would have it taken, right? What was it, like 5 years, 150 million, something like that, I think.
something like that. Yeah,
So, right, we have a former starter in our bullpen, $75 million extension, or, the 3 year, $75 million deal, who can't like break 90 on the gun right now. Right. So we have that guy in the road, right? Like we have that guy. And then we paid Polanco, what, 20 plus million, never played first base to come in and maybe have one decent year, home run side to show him pop in his back. Are you going to tell me we could not have eaten some of the money? Right? Like even if he gave us, right, he's 31 years old, Pete. He gives us three solid more years, even on the back end, those 2 years, even if we shipped him off like a Nemo or whatever, ate some of the money, he still would have been at the plate productive for the next 3 years, still played, a solid first base, to your point, above average. There was no reason to walk away. That was the only one. Well, I get it with McNeil. I get it with Nimmo. I get it with Diaz. As there's at some point where Diaz will lose it, right? Like it just is not going to be
Yeah.
there. And we've watched him walk the park enough, put us in these nail biter situations to try to close out a game. Like, again, Armando Benitez bad, but there were some rough moments with Diaz.
There were,
Yeah.
but I will disagree on the Diaz part. I'm 100% with you on Pete. I just think, having a top-notch closer like that, I know he's had his ups and downs, but that's closer life. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like he really kinda settled into New York and, like, he was the guy we can rely on, and, Uncle Stevie, like, what'd he talk about when he came in? "We're gonna win a World Series within 5 years, 3 to 5 years," whatever the quote was, "All the money in the world," like, it's just hard to accept, with Pete and Diaz, like, those guys being such a cornerstone of this franchise these last, bunch of years just to let them walk, and what was the Diaz difference? I mean, I know the contracts were very similar, the offer the
Yeah.
Mets gave. I think at the end of the day, he probably wanted to leave, and that's fine, but don't you
And
try
I'm
to go
okay
above
with
and
it.
beyond to keep a guy like that?
Yeah, and again, I get what you're saying, but I could see it a little bit better on Diaz just because I do believe at some point when he loses it, it's not he's not gonna be able to get it back, and we've seen what that looks like, and granted, coming off the injury with the WBC, one of the more Met things to do, like, celebrate and blow your ACL, but, and so, like, the year after that, like, I get it, that's it's hard to really judge, but to me, Diaz is just definitely one of those guys at this point in his career that you could be like, you don't wanna be saddled with it just if he does go. Like, so I get what
Yeah.
you're saying. I can understand where they were. Again, Nimmo and McNeil get it, right? Like, even if we go back a few years with Jacob, like, you get it. I mean, I love Jacob, one of my top 5 favorite Mets, but I get it, you know?
I had my
I'm
issues
still
with
mad
him.
about Wheeler. Wheeler,
You know, Someone once said the greatest ability is availability, and that's what bothered me about Jacob. I know obviously injuries aren't your fault per se, but that was something that really it prevented me from putting him in the upper echelon there. But just going back to your point about Diaz, I feel like that's what management could have been thinking about Pete. When you talk about Diaz when he loses it, he's gonna lose it. Like Pete, a little carrying a little more weight, like getting older, like is he gonna fall off that cliff? And I get it. These are huge investments, but, again, going back to it, that was our
yeah,
guy, man, and he
yeah,
didn't deserve to go out like that. Just not even getting an offer from the Mets. It was very disheartening, and I know, you were a Pete guy and so was I, and not every Met fan was. They felt like maybe some felt like maybe it was time to move on, which I understand, but it still hurts.
yeah, and I get it. Pete's a dorky guy, right? Like, I think that's
Quirky.
yeah.
You want
So,
that.
I
You
think
need
that's where
that, though.
some
You
of the
need a guy like that.
challenges to open up to him, but, like, as, like, you see him off the field and things he would do, to me, he's a little bit more Tim Tebow, right? And who he is off the field, and that's true, right? Like, that is who he is as a person.
You'll never find another player who's gonna play as hard as me, and you'll never find another player who's gonna that
Yeah,
was
maybe,
epic.
again, a little bit Tim Tebow, like, just, not all of it.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
But look, a guy from Florida, a guy from, who's religious, right? You can look at the same, Nimmo kind of fit that mold. I can't say for sure, like, I didn't really follow McNeil off the field in that sense, but, also those 3 guys are gone, right? And I think that is something to raise an eyebrow to, right? Like, what was the issue, right? Like,
You
yeah,
think
like
it's just analytics, though? You think it's like, Stearns looks at the stats, and he looks at the projections, and he's like, "Okay, this is the core. These are the core guys based on what we know about their production." Like, "Okay,
like
I
ignore my
can
cat.
I can swap out these guys and we can have better outcomes, really. Is it really just an analytical thing rather than like a gut feeling? I feel like I mean, we can go down a rabbit hole with this and like the issues I have with coaches and managers today in all sports, like how much analytic driven it really is versus like gut feeling and feel for the game, you know? So I don't know. Maybe that's what it was with Stearns.
Yeah, no, I think it's a large part of who he is and what he does in terms of the way he looks at it with the from the team. But like right, like not every scenario can you can do that with. You know, at some point you're gonna be the Brewers. And like we're not the Brewers, right? We are New York baseball. We do have the money. We do have the owner now. Like when we look in New York City, right? We're not the little brother in that sense anymore, right? If you look at the did you know Steinbrenner is like one of the bottom 10 of owners when it comes to money? Like, how
Mm,
wild is that? Like,
that is crazy.
people won't think about that, right? Because of the way George was all those years, but still, we're not in that position with Uncle Steve here, as my cat likes to always be, whether I'm working or doing this, she likes to be a part of it, and it pisses my dog off for sure. But with all that being said, we're not the little brother anymore. I think you have to work on analytics to some degree, but you at some point you got to go with your gut. And I think what we saw, at least out of Pete last year, the way he fought through the offseason, the way he put up, I thought was one of his best all around offensive years. I thought it was dumb to say goodbye to that. And he may go to Baltimore and may struggle in the beginning, but that happens to everybody, right? They struggle with the new teams. Soto did it last year with us. Like that ain't nothing new.
Yeah.
So am I done complaining about Pete? Can you tell I'm annoyed
No, I
about
know.
losing
I
Pete?
know we've talked about it ad nauseum, but I will say I think we still are the little brother until we're not, pal. You know what I mean?
But
I feel
why
like
though?
we gotta deliver, man. You gotta win.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I say in this, if we want to say in the Uncle Stevie era, I mean, I don't think we are necessarily the little brother anymore. I I know the Yankees. Yeah, sure, they're still putting up wins.
They're in the playoffs every year.
Yeah,
In the
yeah,
World Series a couple years ago.
yeah, still like us. You know, the last decade plus here, none of the New York teams are taking it home, right? So, we took Soto away, and I know that still hurts a little bit, and it hurts the feelings of the Yankee fans, which is fine, right? Like they deserve it a bit. They're obnoxious, and maybe not as obnoxious as they used to be. Especially those that came off the 90s into the 2000s. Those were really obnoxious people. But the way I look at it, I don't think about it in that capacity anymore. I think we can compete with anybody if we really wanted to, but I think it just comes down to how much does Stevie want to put that money up, that hedge fund money, see what he puts up for us here as we go forward.
Okay. So big picture. Mets 2026 season here. I'm going to go. I think this team hits better in the clutch than they did last year. They actually get more from Soto in terms of clutch hitting. We know how he was not great in a big spot last year. I think we're going to get more from the top of the rotation, the front end with Peralta and McLean and even Senga, who's looked pretty good. And yeah, I'm going to say 90 wins. I'm going to go 90 and 72. So
90,
so that's
72.
a 7-game improvement, right? They won 83 last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that gonna be enough though? I
90.
think it should be, right? To get in as a wild card?
Yeah. 90 I think will get us in as a wild card for sure. Well, I can't say for sure, but I would see that getting us in. Again, I think it's right. It's the great unknown, right? It's where I sound like a maniac. Um, like I said, this team could be a 78 win ball club, right? If the staff falls off. But I think if we get off to a good start here, which we should, we're coming up against teams that are not as talented as us. I think it's the key is can we set ourselves up as we get into July and be in a good spot as my little dog now goes to the Zoomies, so I apologize. I think if again Vientos is able to step up and, at least be my X factor in that sense, I could see a world where our rotation gets better, right? If the Tigers struggle at all, I could see Tong heading to Detroit and us getting Scoopable, right?
Scoob?
Yeah, that's not impossible, right?
No.
That can happen. And I think there's still opportunity for us to get, maybe not that bat that replaces, what Pete's production has been, but somebody that helps us extend the lineup from where I sit. I do think I don't think it's crazy. You'll say, because I think 95 is a possibility. Now, granted, I know there's what ifs in here, but that's with every team. Got to stay healthy. Got to do this. I hope Juan's not out for like the next 6 weeks because he's got a little bit of a calf pull. But we have a lot of talent up in our lineup. We're solid up the middle. Alvarez is going to continue to grow. Still a young catcher.
Yep.
Again,
And
Door.
I've had my issues with him over the last couple of years in terms of his defense and kind of a little bit of with his technique. Obviously he's been up and down hitting wise. To your point, 95 could be that could be the ceiling for this team. I think if you look at it, best case scenario, what Stearns did, tearing down the core, and we talked about it after the first game. This is how they need to play. This is how they need to be offensively. Small ball, situational hitting. Like, obviously the one dimensional power not there anymore, but maybe a more balanced lineup, top to bottom. And that could be, if we're looking at this, we've got the rose colored glasses on, obviously. We're looking at this, but why not? Why not? So I think that's what, teams that make the postseason do. They're able to grind out wins even when it's not pretty. And this lineup has, I think, the potential to do that.
Yeah, and again, it's not insane. We spend a lot of money on this team. There's a lot of talent, whether it's in the bullpen for the starting rotation, for that starting lineup, there's a lot of talent. Like, to me, I would say after Vientos, just because I know what Vientos can bring from a bat, right? Lubob. Lubob in center is getting like a second, in terms of his baseball career, a second lease on life with it, of getting out of that rough organization. FY, just to Miami, took my daughter to see Marlins White Sox the other day, and the Marlins absolutely thumped them 10-0. Anybody wants to go to a Marlins game, I recommend it. Got third row from the dugout for $30 a pop on the ticket. Can't
Was
beat
that
it.
the Alcantara complete game?
Yes. Sandy was
Oh,
pitching. Yep.
you don't even. It's crazy because I can't remember the last complete game that I saw someone throw.
Yeah.
Not that I was
I'm
in
like,
attendance at, just in general.
and nobody shows up. It's wild to me. And like they're off to a good start. I get it. Like I know, like it's just wild to me that nobody goes. It's seriously maybe 2,000 people if they were lucky for that game on Wednesday.
That's crazy.
Not to get too sidetracked. Love them. I love the addition. You're right. To your point, like we changed defensively with Lindor, Simeon, Lewis Robert up the middle. I do think there's room for Alvarez to grow. But I will say this though: when Alvarez catches, and I noticed over the last couple of years, I do feel like like we have a better game. Like our pitchers have a better game. They
He
they go a
handles the
little bit
staff
longer.
well. He's good with the
Correct.
staff. He is at
Yeah.
calling a game too. Yep,
Yeah. So
100%.
from that perspective, again, I don't think 95 wins is insane, but it's going to take a little bit of work, right? It's going to take a little bit of moving some pieces around, and again, like if so, no Met fan is ever going to be shocked if they show up and win 78 games for a bloated, roster in terms of dollars that we're paying out either. So
Okay. So is 95 your prediction? I know
yeah,
you're leaving it open ended with the
I'm
78.
going, I'm, I'm not
You're
going
like,
78 this year.
okay,
Because nobody's going to see it coming.
you're going
That's what the Mets
95.
love to do. I'm going
95, right?
95
Okay.
wins. They're going to take advantage of the early part of the season. I think the logical thing is they're going to use some of their talent in the farm system to go get them those pieces where we can compete against. Really, it's the Dodgers at the end of the day, right? That's the one team that has to go chase down, and they're going to make those other groups who do have the money better because they're going to be the ones willing to go out and get some more talent.
Don't get me started on the Dodgers. All this deferred money, buying everyone, not paying anyone for like 30 years. Give me a break.
I mean,
I mean,
look, Bobby
they
Bowes
need a
set a
cap.
standard.
Yeah. We need a salary cap, pal. Here's a question. Would you sacrifice a full season of baseball if it meant a salary cap? Like, we know that it's going to
No,
be negotiations and
no,
discussions, so you will
no,
not.
no. I would say no. I think baseball would be stupid to put themselves in that position. The metrics are saying they're overtaking basketball, which NBA is rough to watch. I could go off on the
But
side
sometimes,
note about the basketball game I took my daughter to see in
I
Miami
mean, the
the other
playoffs
day.
are the most exciting. By the way, I'm Knicks, he's Nets, and I guess the Nets are still in the league. I don't know.
Yeah, I just hope they just get demoted back to New Jersey and I'll take it. But no, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't sacrifice the year. We're taking over NBA in terms of like the second most popular sport in America. You have to ride that momentum. What they need to do is look, if the Dodgers are gonna go do that, if the Mets could go do that. It doesn't guarantee anything. And obviously, as Met fans, we could say it doesn't guarantee anything because we could spend all the money in the world and still have a losing record. What they need to do is that floor has to come up. Those teams out there cannot spend so little. They have to invest into their opening day roster, put that money into the team. So to me, I rather see it come up from the bottom as opposed to restricting from the top.
Yeah, I think we might agree to disagree on this. I think we need to have a cap in baseball, and I'm willing to sacrifice a year for it. But we can get into this on another episode. I wanna pivot, pal. Okay, we gave our
You
Mets
like being wrong. It's
predictions.
okay. I'll let you go on that one. You can be wrong all you want.
I want to
Nobody's stopping the momentum of MLB today, so stop it.
Fair enough, fair enough. Let's pivot to some breaking news that came down today with my hockey team. The Islanders have fired Patrick Waugh. 4 games left in the season. Currently, they are third in the Metro Division. They're in a playoff spot currently, but only 4 games left, and a couple teams chasing them have a game or two in hand. So they definitely don't have anything locked up, and they've lost 4 in a row, and they've looked very bad these last 4 games, especially defensively in front of Ilya Sorokin. It's been kind of ugly to watch, man. And I did not expect them to fire the coach. I knew it was a possibility maybe after the season if they missed the playoffs. But obviously this is a desperate it feels like a desperate attempt to not miss the playoffs. We hear now that it's Peter DeBoer they're bringing in, the former Vegas coach, Dallas Stars, used to coach the Devils, brought them to the finals, I believe 2012, was it?
Yep.
Uh, so the guy's got a pedigree. The guy is a winner. Oh, he's brought multiple teams to the playoffs, the cup finals. But it's just the timing is very strange to me. Have you seen anything like this? And what is your opinion of DeBoer? Obviously, you being a Devils fan, I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
If we go back a quarter century, a little bit more about that, maybe one of the greatest hockey organizations, I got to say it right, fired their coach while in first place and went on to win the Stanley Cup that year. So if the legendary 99 2000 Devils can do that, honestly, one has worked before, so I get it. Look, the Islanders haven't had obviously a great deal of success going, pretty much most of your lifetime, which is okay.
Right.
I get it.
But the four straight Stanley Cups happened right around the time I was born. So, I mean, there's not a
Yeah.
lot of memory there for me,
Yeah.
only through the stories my dad told me.
Yep. So with that being said, I think if you feel like the ship is sinking on what has been a solid season,
A bit of
why
an
not?
overachieving season. My point is, like, I feel like Wah, with kind of an average roster, got this team to the playoff hunt. And then at the deadline, the GM, Matthew Darsh, who's his first year with the team after Lamorello stepped down last year, he
Sweet Lou.
traded off some assets. He traded some assets, some draft picks, some young players for a couple veterans, defenseman Carson Soucy. They bring in Braden Chen from the Blues, older guys. Andre Palat, they bring in from the Devils.
Love Palat.
He's got 1 goal in his however
First
many
game.
games. Yeah, it was in his first game. So, I feel like this is a little bit of the GM kinda covering his ass in a way, like, I made these moves and now the team is going downhill, like, I don't know. It just seems weird. I like Patrick Waugh. I thought he really was passionate about, the Islanders. He was passionate about his job. He cared, you know, I just it just kinda hit me today. It was a bit shocking, but
Yeah. No,
with
I
4 games left, we'll see what happens.
yeah. No, look, I know it could be shocking and, I'm sure not often is it going to result in a team winning the Stanley Cup like the Devils did it. But, to me, sometimes you do Hockey, much like football, or it's a very physical game. Different type of physical game, of course, from like a basketball or baseball. But there's a real grind to it, and I think if you can see that the team is falling off, and you want to make a mark, you believe in what the roster looks like today. To your point, right? If there's some of those moves that he made, or maybe the moves he didn't make, to some degree, the GM and above have to believe in what they're putting out on the ice, and you feel like you're losing that locker room, you're losing that team, you're losing that momentum. I don't see it hurting, at this point to go and just go for it, right? And, again, hockey is one of those very physical, demanding games that you just need somebody in your ear, grinding you to get over that hump mentally. So from that perspective, the shock might wake them up, and you might get a really hot team rolling it into the playoffs, and maybe your goalie will stand on his head, you know, take them to the finals. But, if you compare it to the last, 40 years, it's worth the shot at this point.
Yeah, I think, in a couple days, the sting will wear off and the shock will wear off, and they have 4 days off actually before they play again. If they start their final 4 game run here. So, we'll see what happens. He's got some time to kind of make some tweaks. I don't think you're going to see any major changes. I mean, what can you really do at this point in the season? But
It's all mental, right?
yeah, and
That's what you
yeah,
need.
yeah. It's definitely mentality, and maybe if they can clean some things up in front of Sorokin, the defense will look a little better than it has. Because if you look at the stats, I don't have them in front of me, but the number of high danger shots that he's faced this year, that's why he's been in the Vezina conversation for most of the year. He's performed ridiculously, in the face of those high danger chances. And I think now they've been running him to the ground. It's just been a grind. The backup Riddick hasn't played a lot lately. Sorokin just continues to play like every game. And I get it. I get why Wah was doing that. I think he felt the heat, but
Yeah.
it's gonna be tough. I think obviously he's DeBoer is going to have house money. He's going to be playing with house money now, right? He's going to have a 4 year deal, so he's going to have time to kind of reshape the team in his vision. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, pal, we've been through it with all our teams. The coaching hire. I feel like it happens a lot more with my teams. I feel like the Jets firing Saleh midseason a few years ago. Yeah, it just the funny thing is when Lamorilla was GM, January 2024, they fired Lambert and they brought in Watt in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
So 2 years later, it's like the whole thing is happening all over again. So,
But at
yeah,
least you get a coach who has, who can win. And, again, like you need the mentality shift at this point in the season. You need your group to dig down and do what they need to do, and do the little things on the ice to make that difference, right? So, like, there's not in terms of options, there's no trades you can pull off at this point, or right? There's nobody, waiting in the wings to join the team.
the answer's within the building.
Yeah, yep. And here you are, lucky that Jack is not, more than likely not making the playoffs this year after his heroic run in the Olympics, but you
We
know
salute you, Jack. I have
still
no,
the greatest pitcher ever taken, Jack Hughes.
there's some Ranger fans that are like, butthurt about it, like booing the guy. They booed him. Some Ranger fans booed him. I've seen at the like when he threw out the first pitch for the Yankees game, and just kind of like I
There
don't feel
there
that hatred in my heart.
there's
You know,
there are certain character flaws there, like you can see Ranger, Yankee fan, right? Like you connect the dots, and as people, there's some character flaws in that, so it's not surprising.
so pal, we've got a lot to talk about. I'm looking forward to getting this podcast going. I think we're coming up on an hour now, so I think maybe next time we can dig in more to Geno Smith back in New York. We can see how the Islanders are faring after this week.
Hold on, wait, time out, time out.
Yeah, yeah,
What was Aaron's comment about Gino?
he's going to bring us to the promised land.
Is that, I mean, like, is
For
that
me, for
nothing?
me, the promised land is 9-8. Give me a winning season. I don't need anything else other than that.
Let me tell you about the next Jets coach that's going to get fired mid-year. His name is Aaron Glenn. He's going to get fired mid-year. To
Frank
make
Reich's
that
going to take
comment,
over. Yeah. Yeah.
To make that comment, it just to me reeked of somebody that knows, like he's in trouble.
He can't help
And
himself. It's unbelievable, the things that come out of his mouth, and it's just like but it's just with this team in general, it's just one thing after another. It's just a constant headline, it's a constant in the spotlight, even when they're bad, which they've been bad for 15 years now. Now they have the longest playoff drought in the 4 major sports with the Buffalo Sabres making the playoffs now. So,
yeah.
I don't when's it gonna end, pal? I This
Well,
is a
I
whole
promise
other
you
can of
this.
worms. Yeah,
I
we
promise you this. It's not going to end in the 2026 season. Aaron Glenn is going to get fired halfway through. You're going to end up with a very bad record, but
we're gonna get
I
Arch Manning?
I don't know if Arch Manning's the guy for you or if that's going to happen. But from my understanding, people are bullish on the draft class or the QB draft class for next year. And at the end of the day, right, we're in the same spot, right? Two of the worst franchises over the last 15 years, your team, my team in the NFL. There's parts of me where seeing flashes of Trevor last year, looking like he might turn the corner. Right? But at the end of the day, we can't get this. It just seemingly, it's hard to get it done in the NFL without that top tier quarterback or at least that top 10 or 12 in the league. And that's okay, right? Like it is what it is. I think just the frustration where I feel for you is here we are in April. The draft hasn't happened. You're going in with Aaron Glenn, Geno Smith. I mean, Geno Smith, who got his face smashed for being an asshole, is your quarterback now. And, here we are. Like it is as jet as it gets by
It's
having
very
Geno.
jet-like. It's very jet-like.
Were there picks involved for Geno Smith? Was there a trade?
There was a trade, yeah.
There was a trade. You traded for Geno
Well, here's the
Smith, right?
thing. You knew if he became a free agent, you weren't gonna be able to sign him. He wasn't gonna come here willingly. You had to make a trade for him, right?
I mean, it's true. He wasn't willing to come there willingly.
He was gonna have, I think, a few other suitors.
Maybe,
You
maybe
would
because
think.
he had a bad experience the first time around, got
Yeah,
his face broken for being an asshole, right? There is that
I
story.
know, I know.
What year was it he was drafted again?
2013, 2nd round, yes. So, pal, we're gonna have a lot of time to get into that.
I
I
just
think
wanted to come back to it. I just wanted to
yeah.
just want a little bit on that one. I couldn't let that one go. The Aaron Glenn's comment again. Nothing could better put an exclamation point that dude's going to get fired halfway through the year than making that
Did you see the
absurd
one though he
comment.
said before that one, he said a couple weeks before that, he said, "Calling defense is my superpower." So he's
I
gonna call
mean,
the defense this year. I mean,
I mean, he should go
well,
for it. I mean, if I'm him, I'm all in. I like this.
he's gotta, right? If he's coaching for his job, he's gotta go out on his terms, call the defense, do what you gotta do. But that was another one of those, like, headline grabbing quotes, like, "Come on, you didn't have to say that."
Yeah, I mean, do we have you on the schedule this year? I got to check. I'm hoping. I hope so. But yeah, man, I feel for you there. It's gonna be a long year.
We got a lot to talk about here on the Unqualified podcast. You can catch us on YouTube, the Unqualified podcast, and Instagram at the UQ podcast. And we'll be back next time. We have a lot to discuss. We'll recap the Mets next week and how they fared, the Islanders with the new coach. We'll get into the Geno Smith stuff and whatever else you want to talk about, pal. Grab bag.
Yeah, I mean, I'll spend an hour on Aaron Glenn. I promise you. It's just gonna be. I'm with Aaron Glenn and Fireman Ed. I mean, right up there. Those are my people that I'm gonna spend an hour talking about for sure.
Something I'm looking forward to though with your team is now this rivalry with Cohen and Salah in the same division after what happened last year when the
Yeah.
Jags played the Niners and what happened as they were walking off the field and that whole thing. So I want to get into that too next time. We'll talk about how you're feeling and just kind of the outlook with that division going into the draft.
Well, let's just say this. If I was GM, I'm willing to trade Travis. Anybody want to give me a first round pick back? Because I
Wow.
feel like we got ripped off on that one last year. Just
Mm,
saying.
wow.
And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the two way is really, he's really that guy to play two way in the NFL. And I feel like at best, maybe either we have a slot receiver or, a nickel cornerback. And for that being said, for what we gave up, again, there's a reason why your team and my team have lost so many games. I think it comes back to the draft and poor decision making, but I could be wrong.
100%. He's Brendan. I'm Pat. This is the Unqualified Podcast, and we will catch you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.